You're listening to Brainwork Framework, a business and marketing podcast brought to you by focus-biz.com.
Business owners, marketers, and neurodivergent individuals. You're going to want to listen to this next podcast episode. With us today is Shane Thrapp. He is the ADHD Entrepreneur Coach from Creating Order from Chaos. He has a long list of achievements, notable certifications here, and a lot of experience and tips and tricks to share with us today. Shane, thanks so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So Shane, take us through your entrepreneurial journey. You have a unique situation and story to tell, and kind of take us through some of those challenges and how you overcame them.
Yeah. Whenever it comes to ADHD, a lot of times, most of us really feel lost when we're younger, especially whenever we get out of high school. And that's actually the start of my journey. Well, the journey goes way back. Importance here is on entrepreneurship and careers. So a lot like other ADHD people, I bounced from job to job in my lower 20s, and I was homeless a number of times, and I struggled a lot until I really got into a place where I started learning about project management. And that was the start of everything for me. And in learning about project management, I really started developing a system that really worked for me. And at the time, I didn't know I had ADHD or autism. And it was really about taking a time to really explore who I was. And project management really helped me that. I started learning about the 5 whys and really started developing a system to look at my patterns and recognize what worked for me and what didn't work for me, and then how to start building a continuous improvement process. And a lot of people out there who understand Six Sigma project management just heard everything there. And it really resonated with me. And as I started exploring it when I was 25, I started realizing that part of what I really enjoyed doing was leadership. I enjoyed leading people, and I'd done a lot of self-help and learning, and I'd actually found myself continuously in these management or leadership roles, no matter what I did. And when I really made that realization, I started going, okay, well, the pattern is I go to a job, I'm there for a year, I start self-sabotaging because I'm bored out of my mind, or the manager's not doing the things that I'm telling them that they should be doing, because I'm recognizing problems before they're going to happen because of my problem solving pattern recognition skills. And all of these things just really led me to really get into project management as a career. But we're taught all of our lives that we should find a company, work for them for 30 years and retire and get the watch and a pension and all that stuff. And that was not going to be me. And so I wound up getting into freelance project management. And I walked into the headhunter's office. I said, here's my resume. Here's my certifications. I'd like to get into short-term project management roles for 3 to 8 months at a time. No more than that, because if it's any more than that, you're going to lose me. And sometimes I got into some really good relationships with a lot of them, because once I started doing that one job and that boss was going back to my headhunter and saying, this guy was great, thank you so much for him, he did a wonderful job. And I started building a reputation. I started working for really high-end companies, Wells Fargo, Duke Energy, which is a large electrical conglomerate, Cisco. And it was in Cisco where I really shined and really developed things, because I was working for a manager who brought in people who really ran the range of different neurodiversity, And again, I didn't know I had ADHD or autism at the time, but that was when I was started really exploring that, because my oldest son got diagnosed, and I started really looking into it, and it was just kind of a light bulb moment for me. And a lot of people actually in the men's group that I run, the men's ADHD support group, that's how a lot of them find out about their ADHD, is their child gets diagnosed with it, because ADHD is hereditary and there's genetic components to it. And that was where things were really starting to resonate with me. But then in 2016, I got really sick, mental health issues, and I ignored it. And then in 2018, my body decided to say, you know what, you ignored me then, you're not going to ignore me anymore. And so I developed fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, and I had a nervous breakdown and my body shut down, and I wound up being bedridden for much of time. And then in 2019, we discovered that we were going to have twin babies and I was going to be a stay-at-home dad. That's what my wife told me, and it killed me. I'm the man of the family, right? I'm supposed to be the provider, not the stay-at-home dad. But I found out my diagnosis with ADHD in 2018. I started working with a coach in 2019 to really develop a better understanding of what I could do. And we started really looking at what my skill set was, and coaching came into play, life coaching. And that was the next step. My ADHD coach, she was like, this is kind of a logical progression for you, by the way. You're a project manager. Why don't you just project manage people into figuring themselves out? And I'm like, oh, that makes way too much sense. Why didn't I think about that? And she says, you have ADHD and you have zero self-reflection. And I'm like, point taken. So, from there, it just naturally progressed because I understood ADHD. I had such a bad journey into getting diagnosed with ADHD. And then eventually I found out that I also had autism. And it was just such a very difficult journey. If I figured that if I could help people make their own way through it and cut down any of that time, I was going to support them. I was going to help people. I was going to make a change in the world. And then along the way, I found the men's ADHD support group, and it was a Facebook group, and I joined them, and I was really enthusiastic about the support that they were giving. And I wanted to do more. And so I joined them, and I actually joined the leadership team. And then in 2022, we turned it into a nonprofit. And so now we expanded into public speaking. We're doing in-person events. We've been doing weekly events on Facebook where subject matter experts coming in, talking about it, have weekly peer support meetings. We do a lot of different things, including having a podcast about men's ADHD and a YouTube channel that we post a lot of content to. And that then turned into me now working for Dueling Minds, an ADHD support group, and autism ADHD dual diagnosis is what that means. I'm now recognized as an expert in my field, and I am speaking at the International ADHD Convention, and I am now also the marketing lead for the International ADHD Conference. And it's just been a bonkers ride, brother. It's just been a bonkers ride.
What a killer journey, man. That sounds incredibly fascinating. And to hear what you went through, how you overcame those obstacles that came your way. And then I appreciate everything that you're doing for other people now, because you're mixing what you were great at, what you wanted to. It's this blended, this passion and expertise that you're bringing together and putting on the table. So much appreciated. You're doing so many things right now, though. Are you feeling overwhelmed, or is that just a superpower that those with ADHD might have, that they can manage multiple things? Or is it just the Shane thing?
It's kind of a combination of all of the above. So a lot of people with ADHD often do have a lot of crossover with autistic spectrum issues as well. But there's also a subset of that where they also have autism as a dual diagnosis. And it is much more prevalent than a lot of people think. 40% of people with ADHD also have autism, and vice versa. 60% of people with autism have ADHD. And it is overwhelming. That is the key feature of ADHD and autism is overwhelm, emotional regulation. Our emotions are stronger. We feel things more. But it's not just the negative feelings, right? It's not just anger, rage, and despair, and sadness, and jealousy, and all of those things. It's also all of the happiness and the joy and the sense of accomplishment and like social justice things. It's all of these things combined. And when we don't understand ADHD or autism, we do not know why we are so overwhelmed. And we don't even recognize that we are overwhelmed, because a lot of the symptoms of overwhelm sounds like depression, which is one of the reasons why ADHD and autism are often in adults misdiagnosed as depression or anxiety disorders or things of that nature, because the symptoms are so similar. The root cause is different. And when we look at that and we look at the totality of those things, when you are looking at understanding how to manage ADHD, you have to understand that you have ADHD. You have to recognize that there's a problem. And then you start being able to figure out how your brain works in certain ways. And that's what I did. The autistic side of my brain loves structure and order and things of that nature. It wants things to fit into a certain place with the certain methods and processes. Sound familiar? The ADHD side of my brain loves chaos. It loves going into a new place and exploring the interesting things and discussing things with people and delving into the intricacies and seeing all that and like really gnarly stuff that's happening in there. And for me, those two things, once I started really understanding those facets, even before I knew I had ADHD and autism, is what made me excel at project management, especially short-term project management. And now looking back over the years, I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And that's what I bring to people whenever I'm coaching with them, entrepreneurs and for people looking to explore their careers and really figure out who they are once they have the diagnosis, or if they're just curious if they have the diagnosis, who have had those same problems of jumping from job to job or career to career or hobby to hobby or relationship to relationship. Once we start exploring that together, then we start to figure out your strengths and understanding your values and really start delving into that and really countering a lot of those social expectations that a lot of us are taught by neurotypical people who don't have an understanding of what we deal with because we think differently. I've never really liked the ADHD as a superpower phrase. It's not that it's a superpower, it's a different power. What we think is just extraordinary, in neurotypical standards is our normal. But neurotypical people can find their keys every day and they don't lose their socks. And it's not that consistent issue that we deal with. We always lose our keys. We have a serious issue with time management because time works differently for us. And yes, neurotypical people, I know you lose your keys every now and then. I mean, I lost my keys 7 times last week. Tell me if you did that. And it's important to understand the differences in how our brains work. And once you find that, that's the key to your success. The other aspect of that is understanding overwhelm and recognizing when you're starting to feel overwhelmed. And that's where therapy comes into play. A lot of times my coaching practice is helping people get into therapy and getting the support and understanding that they need so that they are able to start understanding overwhelm and emotional dysregulation and how to cope with and process those things and understanding trauma. And all of that has to be addressed by a therapist who's trained in those things. Coaches like me deal with the practical application of techniques and skills and learning about them and developing your strengths and giving you permission to delegate stuff to people, right? That's the thing for entrepreneurs you need to understand. You need a team. And I know that a lot of men are taught, oh no, if you're going to do it right, do it yourself. If you want it done, if you're a real man, you can do it all, right? I mean, and that's the thing. We can't. Nobody can. No CEO in the world is alone. There's no solopreneurs out there that do not have a support team. They've got a virtual assistant, a personal assistant, a bookkeeper, a CPA. They've got people managing the day-to-day drudge. It's important to understand that, but sometimes people need permission to get away from those negative stereotypes that they were taught and really break through. And that's what I do for people.
That is fantastic. With the number of entrepreneurs and business owners that are listening right now and hearing some of the symptoms that you're describing, the time management, the emotional regulation, everything as you're kind of going through the line, how many undiagnosed ADHD cases do you suspect could be out there? Because it seems like, I don't know, you kind of hear from people, they maybe joke about either having ADHD or wonder if they do. Do you think it's possible that they do, or that there's many out there who just aren't aware that they have it yet?
Yeah, I always call bullshit on the CDC and their statistics. First off, they say there's 11% of children out there who have ADHD and another 12 to 15% who have autism. And ADHD isn't considered a real diagnosis by the CDC. It's only now starting to become really aware in the last 2 or 3 years that it's an actual thing. And so those statistics aren't there. There's also really a serious lack of understanding of how prevalent ADHD is because so many people, whenever they're younger, have to develop a mask to fit in. And some people are better at it than others. Some people develop that mask, especially when they're exposed to severe trauma. They develop a mask that is a survival instinct and thus fits a little bit better. And so they go through dealing with all of those different issues, but they have to hold it all in. And the thing about ADHD is because we aren't very self-reflective and we don't have that natural metacognition that a lot of neurotypical people have, it is very hard for us to really develop that own sense of self at a young age. So what we do instead is we take all of the external resources and messages and we build this image of who we are supposed to be and try to be that thing. But it never fits. And what you're actually doing is you're taking on burdens. You're putting on a backpack when you're 4 years old and you're putting a pebble in it every single day when you're going to school, when you're at home, when you're around your friends, and you're trying to meet the expectations that you think the people around you have. And you keep that backpack on you for the rest of your life until you start to understand that that burden that you're carrying is starting to kill you. That's why you have breakdowns when you're 30, or, mental health catastrophes, or heart attacks at young age, because you're carrying around so much mental baggage from that. And it's in understanding that when you start to take that backpack off and relieve some of that pressure and start to become more authentic, when you find your true self and you're starting to be able to be more comfortable around people, when you start to finally live. It's also when you start to find those relationships that you need and the career that you want, the business you want to run. And that's why I always call BS on those statistics, because it doesn't take into consideration the masks that so many people wear. I actually think it's probably significantly higher, more like 25% of people. Because when we look at the statistics for people who are entrepreneurs or CEOs who have some sort of ADHD or autism diagnosis, there's some pretty famous ones out there. That's a significantly higher number than what the CDC says. On top of the fact the CDC says that 11% or 12% of children have ADHD, but only 5% of adults have ADHD. Well, we know that that's not true because ADHD is a lifetime issue. You don't grow out of it. You just learn to cope. But in the 17,000 members that we have in our Facebook group, the story is almost always the same. I'm 30, I'm 35, I'm 40. My life has destroyed itself. I'm constantly stressed out. I'm on my second divorce. I'm on my 15th relationship. I can't find a relationship. The story is always these stories of people whose lives came to a point where everything just was so much that it destroyed them. And our job as a nonprofit organization is to rebuild those people and give them the safe space and give them the place to be able to talk about things. My job with Dueling Minds is to help people with ADHD and autism dual diagnosis rediscover and understand and redevelop a comprehensive system around themselves that doesn't have their brains constantly warring with each other, that takes the components of ADHD and autism and starts to find the places where they marry together and put those puzzle pieces back together in a way that works for them. It's why this work is so important for me, is to help those people and prevent, hopefully, what I went through and what so many other people went through for the next generation.
It really is something that is really unknown until we explore more and start to learn and understand these symptoms and how to better treat them. And then, like you said, just the complete diagnosis overall to have a better understanding so we can fix it. Now, when it comes to people understanding the symptoms, what they might have, or understanding those with ADHD might have as far as the symptoms, What then can they do for the treatment? Is there a role, either diet, exercise, or like activities can play a role versus pharmaceuticals? Can they work hand in hand? How do you see the best, like the most effective treatment for that?
So the most effective treatment, we understand this now. It's fully confirmed. There's a metric ton of science around it. First off, get diagnosed. You need to be working with a psychiatrist to understand if you're dealing with ADHD and autism, PTSD. If you have the comorbidities like actual major depression or bipolar or borderline personality, these can be comorbidities, but you need to have a full understanding of the actual mental health issues that you have. Just like you need to have a physical checkup constantly, especially after the age of 30, you need to be having a mental health checkup constantly. You also need to be working with your psychiatrist to understand, are there medications that you need to take? Right? We know that stimulants help with the core features of ADHD, such as hyperactivity and attentiveness, focus, memories, things like that. But we also know that they help with the more important feature of emotional regulation. Emotional regulation is the ultimate facet of ADHD and autism. It is what makes things so much more difficult for us. And it is important for people to understand that about themselves and understand why those medications help. ADHD is a dopamine deficiency in the brain. It doesn't communicate correctly between the different parts of your brain that manage emotions and manages your executive functions and manage your impulsivity. And when you marry all three of those issues together, we have explosive outbursts of emotions. We have constant states of overwhelm and burnout, and we find ourselves feeling a lot more distraught and stressed and frustrated and eventually suicidal. People with ADHD that's undiagnosed have a 34% higher likelihood, especially men, of suicidal ideation, especially if they have isolated themselves because they are overwhelmed by constant rejection or the feeling of imposter syndrome of never feeling like we're good enough or that we're going to be successful enough or that we aren't successful enough, even though you're a CEO or you're making $150,000 or $200,000 a year or whatever those issues are. That's why you've got to work with a psychiatrist because you may need medication. It doesn't always have to be stimulants. So guanfacine, clonidine, lamictal, these are mood stabilizers that are not stimulants. And they do help with ADHD symptoms. But there's nothing wrong with stimulants. There's a huge stigma out there about them because they can be abused, especially by neurotypical people, and they often are. But the reality of the situation is ADHD medications and stimulants often help prevent addiction to other things like marijuana, alcohol, cigarettes, all of these other things that we deal with, eating disorders. That's what they help with because they regulate the dopamine and we don't have to have that dopamine fix that we get from all of those other addictive substances. And so it's really important to understand that. The other thing is therapy. Therapy is integral to managing ADHD. In fact, I think it's more important than medication in many cases because you've got to learn about your emotions. Like I said earlier, you've got to understand how to cope with them, how to deal with them, how to process them, how to even just know what emotions are and how to express them in ways. Like a lot of us run around with resting bitch face because we don't realize our face is doing a thing. And it makes us very unapproachable. And it really affects our social cues when people think that we're unapproachable and we don't understand why people think we're unapproachable. It's because our faces are in constant scowl mode or something. And so we have to understand those things. And it's about learning the social interactions that we can and should adhere to while still remaining authentic to who we actually are. We talked about this beforehand, right? Like looking people in the eye. Like autistic trait, I don't want to look you in the eye. It's uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable. And there's a physical issue. There's a visceral feeling of, oh, in my body whenever I have to look people in the eye for too long. But until I go through therapy, I don't know how to communicate that. When I go through therapy, I learn it's okay to talk about those things. Fidgets, right? It's okay
Yeah.
to have fidgets because you want to know why. There's a scientific reason why I should have a fidget in my hand. Thank you very much. It is allows me to be able to focus on the question that you're asking because whenever I have one of these, I'm activating my default mode network to let my fingers do this weird little fidget thing where I'm able then to let my task positivity system actually communicate effectively in a way where I'm not rambling about a lot of different things. And that's a part of the ADHD brain. And all of this is so important. The other things that are important, exercise is actually the second most effective management of ADHD symptoms after medications. Hugely important. But it doesn't mean go to the gym 7 days out of the week. It means 10 minutes of movement a day. That's it. 10 minutes of movement. You're doing something that has you moving around. And it's that understanding that helps you manage ADHD. The psychoeducation about ADHD is what helps you manage ADHD. And you're not going to get those without professionals like doctors and therapists and coaches like myself, unless you hyper focus on it for 12 years, like I did.
But for me, I've already learned so much from everything that you've shared, just understanding like what the symptoms are and then knowing how to treat them. And I love that you went into detail about each aspect, what's scientifically proven, what can help, the first most, the second most, here's some tips. And then you even went into what's the actual working method behind the fidget devices that most people are like, I don't understand the process, but you explained it perfectly. That's the first time I learned about it. So it's super cool to learn this. With all the entrepreneurs that you've worked with before, without giving their info, can you share a story about an entrepreneur business owner who went through those stages, was diagnosed, and then had a more positive outcome for themselves and their business after joining your group or your coaching?
Yeah, I actually work with a person constantly. We're accountability buddies now. One of the things that I do for a lot of professionals is I build cohorts of professionals who are in similar fields or very like fields and things like that. We work together in these small groups, 3 to 5 people, no more than that. And what we do is we meet weekly, right? And we organize in such a way where we're essentially kind of co-working or building up ideas or just bouncing concepts off of each other. Hey, I'm going to work on this business aspect. What do y'all think about this? Well, on the marketing side of things, this is one of those things you need to look at. Because the thing about people with ADHD and autism is we have 1,000 different ideas and we're great at brainstorming and problem solving and pattern recognition for us autists out there. And it's really important to understand having that little group community, especially for solopreneurs or entrepreneurs, helps us be able to be more effective. And one of the people I work with, she runs a virtual assistant group and they build Kajabi courses. And when we first started working together, I didn't know I had ADHD until I started working with you. And now I know I have ADHD. Like, all right, well, let's talk about that. And so now we started really exploring what that meant. And she completely revamped her role in her business to get away from the drudge work that she really couldn't stand doing. She started recognizing that she was an initiator, right? The developer, the person who had the ideas, who then needed to have project managers and virtual assistants who took it to the next step and did the management aspect of it. And once she started really understanding about that, she saw her business just skyrocket, but not just her business, but her own personal life, her own work-life balance, her own joy in what she was doing, because she was constantly hitting burnout and burnout and burnout. And it was really making her start to hate the thing that she loved doing. And that's what happens when burnout hits us. We stop loving what we do. And the thing is, like, when we don't stop that, we find ourselves really becoming disgusted with ourselves. And there's a lot of really negative emotions that come from that to then when we shut down, we're never able to go back to that. But if we can stop and take a step back and reevaluate what we do and really explore the things that we enjoy doing and what are within our strengths and what follow our values, we find ourselves being able to make those adjustments to the work that we do, or even completely shift the business aspect of what we run to be able to do the things that make us successful. A lot of people with ADHD are taught by neurotypical gurus out there that you should find your niche and just stick to it. that doesn't always work for us.
That's got to be
Creating,
something scary to hear, like stay with one thing forever. Like, no, I can.
yeah, but I create the order from chaos because that's not what I'm going to do, right? Coaching is not always what I'm going to do. I'm going to take and create order from chaos, but in different fields. And so I do project management, I do business development, I do podcasting, I do website design, I do all these different niches that all fit within the overall goal of what my business does. But then I shift my businesses when I start to feel myself being overwhelmed or burned out. I shifted to focus on the things. And right now I'm looking into group coaching, business development, entrepreneur coaching, and I've moved away from the individual ADHD coaching. And that allows me to not get burned out on individual coaching, and I can go back to it later on down the road. But I want to work with businesses and entrepreneurs now because that's something I'm enjoying now. And it's something I'm good at, and I enjoy that aspect. And so eventually I'll go back to individual one-on-one ADHD coaching after I've done this business coaching for a while. And eventually maybe it'll be more public speaking, which is like 2025 plan. But the things I plan for that kind of stuff, it's not just on the spur of the moment. It's in my business plan to have those features. And then I shift. And the same thing applied to my client. She had to understand that her business could expand to do different things that she wanted to. She just needed to make sure she had the people in place to manage what she didn't want to do anymore so that she could focus on what she did when she wanted to focus on what she wants. And that's what I mean about psychoeducation when it comes to ADHD, all of those things combined.
But kind of understanding how you work best, and then you can adapt and be flexible to what your needs are. And then you're still providing value to these clients and shift back into one topic or subtopic further down the road. But it's all about managing that, just the foundational level of your stress and the time management. And you're like, this is where the passion lies. This is what I can focus on. This is what I want from it, which is beautiful. Now, Shane, for those who want to get in touch with you and learn more about what you do and your special offers and lead magnets, where can they go to find out more about you?
You can go to creatingorderfromchaos.com. That's my main website. You'll be able to go there. If you look at it, there's a little tab for strengths and values freebie. Click on it and you're going to get a PDF that kind of breaks down the very initial process of what I go through with people. Then whenever you find out that you go through that and you're like, hey, I'm not doing anything with these, that's when you message me. Let's have a discussion about that. Let's really start to explore those and find that passion that you're missing in the business that you're doing, and really discover who you really are and get you the support and the structure that you need in your life.
I love that. Now, Shane, if there was one thing that you could kind of teach your younger business self, entrepreneurial self, just to kind of get further ahead, what would that one piece of advice that you would share with yourself?
I think one of the things I wish I'd understood about myself when I was much younger is that it's okay to be different, right? We can take the lessons that we learned from our childhood, from the people around us, so the wisdom that people share with us. But if you're different, that doesn't mean you're broken. It just means that you're different, and there's nothing wrong with that. And whenever we discover that we have ADHD or autism or some sort of neurodivergence, that doesn't mean we're a broken neurotypical. It just means that we're different. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. Just learn to be who you are and find the ways that you can celebrate that and learn how to make a difference in the world in the way that you're different.
I love that, Shane. Thank you so much for taking the time to share all these tips and tricks with us. For those who are interested, we'll have the links available down in the show notes and the description so you can get connected and take advantage of his offer and learn more about ADHD and how it may be affecting you. Shane, what are you most excited for 2024 and 2025? Sounds like you're busy. You're doing a lot of speaking engagements. What else haven't you shared yet that you're most excited about?
I'm working with CHAD, which is one of the number one organizations for children with ADHD and parent support. We are really doing a lot of really great things with the International ADHD Conference. 2024, 2025 is going to see a huge change in the way that we do things there. There's going to be a lot of really cool initiatives that are coming out of there with other enterprise solutions for businesses that are out there. who are looking for professionals like myself and some of the bigger names out there, Beth Bardine and Suzanne Sophos and others like that, there are going to be where we're actually going to be working with companies to develop these systems and develop these understandings about ADHD in the workplace. If you're looking for a facilitator who does that kind of work, that's what I do as well. I will come to your business. I will do virtual. I will train your people and your managers on how to do that. And that's one of the big things that we're going to see in 2025. But if you want to jump on my schedule now, it's a good place to start reaching out to me. I'm just saying I'm going to blow up because I am great at this stuff.
That's amazing, Shane. I mean, obviously, from the work that you do and have done, it's evident how many people you've helped and just the extent of your expertise that you go into this topic. We appreciate you taking the time and sharing that with us, Shane. Congratulations on your past success and really looking forward to what the future holds for you.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me on, man. I appreciate it a lot.
It was a pleasure, man. Appreciate it.